It's about the dollar, the US dollar. And it's about whether the dollar is losing its primacy in the world. And more importantly, if it is, because it is, what are the implications? What does it mean for the United States? Will there be a collapse? What are the other consequences? Very important question. So let me begin by assuring you that yes, the dollar is losing its primacy. There really is no question about this. The disagreement is how fast this process is going and will go, not about whether it will happen, except for a few, mostly on the right wing of political thinking, but even the most steadfast supporters of capitalism and supporters of the United States are able to see that the dollar is literally losing its global position. And what was that global position? Well, it was the dominant currency of the world, pretty much since the end of the Second World War. So that's 75 years and counting. In many countries, the dollar exists as a currency alongside of, or in some cases, instead of that country's currency. Central banks around the world use dollars as part of their reserve alongside gold and other valuable things to show that they can support their currency. And the more the world needs and uses dollars, the more the United States has enjoyed an impeccable economic gain from that. First of all, we give the world dollars in exchange for something. We don't just hand it out. We get something as a nation, as an economy. For example, if we import goods and services and pay for them with dollars, we get something that is worth the work that went into it. The French wine, the Chinese consumer goods, the Indian technology products. And all we give them is cheap little pieces of paper, dollar bills, $100 bills, or the electronic equivalent. It's a wonderful way to get the wealth produced around the world and to give in exchange merely a claim on some wealth that may never be actually demanding something because they use the dollars and buy them and sell them and keep them. Many of the people around the world use the dollars that they accept in exchange for the goods and services they produce to lend those dollars back to the United States government, thereby funding our wars and many of our ongoing governmental activities. And why is that important? Because that allows the government not to tax Americans, but instead to borrow the money from all those who have dollars and are willing to lend it. So the benefits to the United States have been enormous. As the dollar loses its primacy, as more and more people around the world stop using the dollar, reduce using the dollar, all those advantages and many more I don't have the time to go into are being lost. And the impact on the American economy will be large and cumulative over time. Well, then why is the dollar losing its primacy? Much of it has to do with geopolitics. To put it very bluntly and simply, other parts of the world don't want to keep having workers produce and businesses produce valuable goods and services, shipping them to the United States and getting in return dollars. They want the benefits of a currency like the United States has gotten, but they want to share it in it too by having their currency become as important as the United States. Chief among them, the Europeans with the euro, the Chinese with the yuan, and so on. And they have been acting to realize that objective. The most important steps, BRICS, a global alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, with at least another 6 to 10 nations applying now to join BRICS. They want to develop a non-dollar based trade among them. And these are nearly half the population of this planet. They are talking about trading in either the Chinese currency, because that's the most powerful economy among them, or in some organized currency that they set up for this purpose. That's the most tangible change. Here's another one. Literally a few days ago, the Chinese brokered an agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, overcoming the hostility and the wars between them, direct and indirect, overcoming much of the split between Shiite and Sunni Islam. They're opening embassies in each other's countries, the Iranians and the Saudis. And please be aware that Saudi Arabia is the largest producer of oil in the world and is now closer to China, with whom it is trading more and more than it used to be with the United States. That shift is crucial. Trade in oil used to be done in dollars, requiring everyone to keep and hold dollars. China and Saudi Arabia are discussing what they call the petro-yuan, that is, trade in oil denominated in the Chinese currency. The value of the dollar in relationship to other currencies is therefore likely going to fall in the years ahead. That will make imports into the United States, which we now depend on, much more expensive. It will therefore also drive up the price of those imports, and that will be an inflationary boost when the United States needs it least. We will become more and more of an exporter. As our dollar goes down in value, our goods become cheaper for people buying the devalued dollar. It will shift our economy around. Those shifts are always difficult. They may, if they're not properly prepared for, not properly managed, produce a crisis. And it could be as serious as the crisis that threatens from the collapse of the American banking system in recent weeks. So yeah, it is a dangerous, or it could be, but it is more a long-term readjustment of the world that Americans having a hard time getting their heads around. We are not the dominant player in the world today as we were for most of the last century. That is over. And more important than anything is to come to terms with that reality, because it is becoming truer and truer with each passing week. A question that has bothered many of us. I've spent quite a bit of time trying to answer this, so the question is simple. Why have the European countries, kind of lockstep fashion, swung in behind the United States in terms of supporting Ukraine in the war with Russia, supplying Ukraine with weapons, lots of them, financial assistance, lots of it, and generally whooping it up in all the forums of the world against Russia and for Ukraine? In a crude way, we can ask, what's in it for Europe? Why are they doing this? Well, here's the answer as best I can fashion it. First of all, the Europeans did it out of habit. For the last 75 years, since the end of World War II, most of Western Europe has felt supported by the United States, protected by the United States military, and having their interests best served economically, politically, culturally, militarily, by being good allies of the United States. That's what their politicians in power today, that's what they have felt and believed and been trained in throughout the entirety of their careers. That's their go-to place in general. The second reason is that the United States effectively persuaded the Europeans, if they didn't already believe it, that in a contest between the United States with its GDP of $21 trillion and Russia with its GDP of $1.5 trillion, the outcome would come quickly, happily, and definitively. In other words, Russia would collapse. And if you go back and look at the headlines across Europe in the weeks after February of 2022, that's what they all predicted. So it was a way of being close to Mother U.S. at little risk, given what they thought would happen. Other than that, the beneficiaries in Europe were the military producers, and that's an important group of businessmen and women, because they could see that the demand for equipment to send to Ukraine would require that that equipment be replaced, and that would be fat orders for their military. It would also be good news for the military themselves, best illustrated by Germany, which appropriated a vast additional amount of money to its armed forces compared to what they have been doing for years into the past. So the military benefited. And here's another one. A number of governments have shifted from the center left to the center right. The center left, it's typically more skeptical about the alliance with the United States. They support it, but with criticism, with skepticism. The center right champions it as what's best for Europe. So swinging in behind the United States was a chance for the center right to prevail, to build up in the publicity around protecting Ukraine, political support for themselves inside each of their countries. But here, then, what happened? It didn't work out. The Europeans got those benefits, but they have also incurred spectacular costs, and it's crystal clear to me that they miscalculated badly. The costs are huge. The first one comes from the fact that they misunderstood, and in all likelihood, the United States led them in that misunderstanding, that Russia would fold and collapse overnight. It's easy, of course, for me to say that, and the promised collapse is nowhere in sight. But they should have understood what the connections built up over years between Russia, Turkey, India, and above all China, what they would mean. That the Russians would have friends, that the Russians would have allies, that the Russians would be able to solve the problems of the sanctions from the West against them by simply doing what President Obama once called American foreign policy's big change. He called it pivot to Asia. Well, Russia pivoted way more than the United States, and boy, did it pay off. Russia is powerful. Russia has really big friends, selling its oil and gas to them, trading more with them. Russia has really pivoted to Asia. And the Europeans are caught. They miscalculated. They are looking for a way out. It's hard for them to find one. They don't want to disappoint the United States, but they're afraid. And I want to end today by making it clear what they're afraid of. That their miscalculation may have made them, and this is the important point, choose the wrong way. What do I mean? There are now two blocks in the world. It's more clear today than it ever has been. On the one hand, the United States with Europe. On the other hand, China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the BRICS countries, and the new countries applying for entrance into BRICS. That's half the world's people, if not more, with a powerful economic machine at its base in China. Wow. The Europeans are caught between the United States, their old ally, and the temptation to find a new ally where there's more money to be made, where there's more trade to be done, where there's a safer ally to work with. And watching the ceremony a week ago, when China brokered a peace between the Sunni and the Shiite Islamic communities, between Iran and Saudi Arabia, under the auspices of China. Peace where there was war, prosperity where there wasn't. China, one of the world's leading countries needing energy, is now the protector of the two most important countries producing oil in the world, Iran, Saudi Arabia. They already have Russia. Wow. The world is splitting, and the anguish in Europe is, did we choose wrong? And even if the consensus remains, no, we didn't, it would be very naive for anyone to doubt that that question is being asked more and more with ever greater urgency day after day, and may explode into the public view at any moment. The world is changing in major ways, and the direction of change is now clear, and Europe is right at the cusp of what it means to stop denying and to finally confront the implications of these changes for each European country.